Hello, and in this Mac/iOS development tutorial, I want to briefly introduce you to the concept of property observers in Swift. Now, like with a lot of these videos that are discussing generic language features, there are already lots of videos of this on YouTube, and I generally don't like doing those, but this is a more esoteric language feature than many, and there aren't a lot of videos showing this being used in a practical context, so that's what this video is. So, what is a property observer? Well, there are lots of times when we want to change a variable or property and observe that change and do anything when that value is changed. Well, we've always been able to do that, and that's one of the different things about property observers. When you see them, you're like, well, what's the point of this? Anywhere that I can change a value, I can also react to that change, and because I know when I'm changing it, I can react to that change and do whatever I need to do. Usually, even if the system's change it, I get a notification, so I can just listen for the notification and change whatever else I need to change. Property observers are really a convenience thing and allow us to keep our code nice and object oriented. There are two types of property observers: will set and did set. Will set is for observing a property and doing something just before the property changes is when will set gets called, and in the will set we can have access to the new value and do things based on the new value. We can check the new value, we can do anything we want to do, and there's also did set, which gets called immediately after a property is changed, and we can actually access the old value there. I haven't seen any kind of good real world compelling use cases for will set, because it just passes us along the new values on, unless you wanted to do any validation. I don't currently see any real viable use for that, but did set is really useful. So we declare a did set just like a function at the start of where a property is declared, and so we kind of architect that functionality in the class where the property is declared, so it allows us to keep our code really nice and organised. Anyway, I've been talking for way too long, so what we're going to do in this video is take a look at a sample app that I've written to demonstrate some of this stuff, to take a look at the way you would implement it without property observers, and then add property observers to it. So without further ado, let's take a look at our example, which I've got here. All it is a application with a view in it, and it shows it says show custom color, and every time we click it changes the color, and we can also show previous color, and it shows one color before that, and there's another option here, show red color. A couple of things to note about this are that if you know anything about views on the Mac, you know that every time a view gets changed, or its drawing colour gets changed, or anything like that, we have to say to the system that the view needs to be redisplayed or redrawn. So every time we click one of these buttons, same thing's happening. We're setting whatever that colour variable is, that public var, and then we're saying the view needs to be redrawn. Well, because we know that the view needs to be drawn every time that var gets set, by using property observers we can cut out that code and just say, well, whenever you set this var, we know that you need to get a hold of your view and say that it needs to play. We can also cut out several other lines of code to do with setting the previous colour, based on the fact that when a property observer knows that a value is set, it also knows what the previous value was. So let's take a look at our code and see how we would do that. So as usual, I've got an Xcode project open down here, and I've got our main view controller, which is currently the place where all this view drawing code is happening. So obviously I've got a reference to my view here. I've got a var to hold that. When I want to go back to the old colour, I need to know what the old colour was. So that's an optional NS colour. It's optional because if it's the first time using the application, there won't be a colour set yet. And now what do we do every time a button is set? We set our old colour to what's currently there before changing it. We then draw with our new colour, whatever that colour happens to be, and we say that our view needs display. Well, all that these button objects should really be doing is changing what our public variable is on our view, because our view should be responsible for drawing itself. So our controller shouldn't have all this stuff about redrawing and storing the old colour. That should all be handled in our view. So what we want to achieve is, by using property visitors, is we won't need to set needs display 3 times again, and we won't need to harness what our old colour is. So let's get rid of those unnecessary lines. So what we've achieved there is that the code in our controller keeps to exactly what it needs to do. So just updates the model, doesn't mess with the view at all. We actually don't even need this optional old colour variable anymore. So now we're going to move all that logic over into our view. So I'm going to open my view here. We're just going to say that this is the var that controls that drawing. We can see that's the colour that we draw with. So that's what we need an observer for. So we after any values, we just put open curly braces, rather like you would for a computed var, and then inside that we just say did set, or will set if you're doing just before the value is set. And what do we want to do each time the value is set? Well, we know that the first thing we want to do is get a hold of our view and say that it needs to be displayed. Well, now that we're in our NS view rather than in our controller, we don't need to grab hold of the view anywhere because we're already in the view. So we can just say needs display equals true. So we've already taken care of that. How do we take care of this old value handling? Well, what we need to do is because our view can't reach over into our controller, our view needs a variable in and of itself that it can use to keep track of that old colour. So I'm just going to say var old colour is again an optional NS colour, and I need to do proper capitalisation, sorry about that. NS colour, and it's an optional. So how do we then implement the storage of the old colour? Well, every time the new variable is set, we need to get hold of our we need to get hold of the value that it was and set that as this variable old colour so that we can keep hold of it. Well, how do we do that? Well, but if we just start typing old, we see that by default there's inside the scope of this property observer there's a constant called old value. So that's what we can use to harness that variable. So actually you can rename it by and by the way, in will set it's called new value. You can rename it by putting something in there. custom, for example, and if we now ask for that variable, we can see that it's called custom, and that's an NS color. I'm just going to leave it as the default though, because I think old value is descriptive enough. So what we're going to do, we're going to say old value now equals, our old color property equals the value that this used to have before it was reset. And now we can, now still in our view, we can, back in our controller, we now have access to that. So rather than setting our old view, our old color, and dealing with what if it's not set directly in our controller, we can just say old when we ask for the previous color, all we do is change the drawing for properties to a property on itself, that we called old color. So with any luck, if we rerun this, we should see exactly the same behavior, but we've just cleaned up the code a bit. So if I say show custom color, that still works, but critically, if I go back to the previous color, we should still see that color is set. So we've just re-implemented that in an easier way. And let's talk about what the benefits of this are. Well, we know that every time this variable is set, we need to set needs display. So as that's a view thing, why not just do it every time? Why not? Because it's something we know we need to do every time. Why not just almost automatically do this whenever the variable is set, rather than having to remember to do this wherever we set it? Because we know that by default, every time this property is set, that's just going to happen by default. So we're not achieving anything with property observers that we couldn't achieve otherwise, but it's just keeping our code nice and cleaner. So that was kind of hopefully a real world example of property observers. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.